Okay, now we have the next siman that we have is siman memdalid. This has to do with sleeping with tefillin. Okay, what's the problem? Is there a problem with sleeping with tefillin? What would you say, Misvara? What would be the issue?
Relieving gas.
Ah, very good. Is there anything else besides that might be a problem?
Removing your dust from where
yes, okay. We'll see what the Rishonim say about that. You could make another say a problem with sleeping, that it's considered hesech hadat, right? Because when you sleep, b'chora, it's hesech hadat. Why? Because when I sleep, I have no dat. Okay, so what greater hesech hadat than that? Okay, but we'll see. Actually, the Rishonim will discuss that. But the simple reason seems to be from the way Rashi explains on the Gemara is a problem of Shema Yafiach. Here the Gemara in Brachot says, Lo yishan behem, lo yachaz adam tefillin biyado, v'sefer Torah be'ezro'o, v'yitpalel, v'lo yashtin behem mayim, v'lo yishan behem shenat keva shenat aray. Okay? So he says, Lo yishan behem Shema Yafiach. There's another problem. If I'm not wearing the tefillin and they're in my hands, and that's a separate problem, that they might fall on the floor. Now there's another Gemara in Masechet Sukkah which actually allows somebody yashen adam shenat aray betfilin aval lo shenat keva. So there's a whole machloket rishonim here. Is it permitted to sleep shenat aray with tefillin or is it not? Some rishonim say, like the Rosh holds, that it is permitted to sleep them shenat aray. Rabbeinu Yonah says that if I'm holding the tefillin in my hand, I can't even sleep shenat aray. Why? The chayshin and shema yiplu miyado, that they'll fall off my hands. But if I'm wearing them, I'm allowed to sleep shenat aray. Why? He says it's only gzera shema yafiach, and in the case of shenat aray, we don't make a gzera on shema yafiach. The Rambam though says תפילין צריכים גוף נקי, שיזהר שלא תצא ממנו רוח מלמטה כל הזמן שהם עליו, right? So you can't pass gas. He says, לפיכך אסור לישן בהם לא שינת קבע ולא שינת ארעי. In other words, according to the Rambam, even שינת ארעי with tefillin is prohibited. אלא אם הניח עליהן סודר, ולא הייתה עמו אישה ישן בהם שינת ארעי. The only way the Rambam permits sleeping with tefillin is if he covers the tefillin and he's not with a woman. The reason he's not with a woman is because if it's with a woman, then he might come to tashmish, which is also you can't do with tefillin. The only way the Rambam permits to do the shenat aray is to put his hands between his knees. Why? Because if he actually lays down for the shenat aray, then we're concerned that it won't be a shenat aray, it will then be a shenat keva. But the Gemara says if you put your hands in between your knees, since it's an uncomfortable position, it's not going to end up in a shenat keva, it's going to remain in a shenat aray. Just one more point before we see the Shulchan Aruch. Rabbeinu Yonah asks, how can you do shenat aray? He says, ויש לשאול, ואפילו shenat aray האח מותר, ולא אסור להסיח דעתו מהם. בשעה שמתנמנם נמצא שמסיח דעתו מהם. Right? You're taking your mind away from it. הוא אומר, מורי הרב, that's the רבנו יונה, ומתוך דברי רמזה למדנו תירוץ לדבר זה. לוודאי היסח הדעת לא הרי כשעומד בקלות ראש ובשחוק. אבל כשעומד ביראה ומתעסק בצרכיו, אף על פי שעוסק באומנותו בצרכיו, אין דעתו עליהם ממש, לא נקרא זה היסח הדעת. די לא תימה אחי, איך יכול אדם להניח תפילין כל היום? ואח הנמי כשמתנמנם ליקה היסח הדעת, דעת הרבה באותה שעה עומד יותר דרך מורה ושוכח חבלי העולם, ולפיכך מותר לישון בהם שינת ארעי. So he says as follows, היסח הדעת is only when you turn your mind to other things of קלות ראש and schok. But as long as you're engaged in something serious, even though it's not the tefillin, like for example, you're going about your work. Okay, you're not thinking about the tefillin, you're also thinking your umanut, but that's not considered a sechadat. So he says sleeping also is not a sechadat, right? Because I'm not turning my mind over to kalut rosh or tzchok. I am not thinking at all. So that's not considered a sechadat. The sechadat is only if I turn to kalut rosh. Okay, that's why he says by sleeping it's not a problem. The sechadat. So basically, just to sum up, according to many Rishonim, like Rabbeinu Yonah the Rosh, you are allowed to do shenat aray in tefillin, According to the Rambam, you can't even do Sheinat Arai in tefillin. The only way you can sleep with tefillin is if you cover the tefillin and you're not with a woman, and you're doing just Sheinat Arai ben birkav, just to put your hands head in between your knees. See the Mishnah Berurah on this? Mishnah Berurah. He says, "Kol zman she'atfilin berosho bezro." In other words, whether I have tefillin shel yad or tefillin shel rosh, asur lishan behem afilu shenat arai. In other words, the Mechaber rules like the Rambam that even shenat arai is prohibited. Ela im iniach aleihem sudar, unless I cover it with a sudar, with a cloth. V'lo hayta imo isha, and there's no woman with him. By the way, what does putting on the cloth help? I thought that it means that if I cover it, then it's sort of less of a problem of it's more respectful for the tefillin. Here the Mishnah Berurah says it's like a heker. He says the gazrin and shema yavo lafiach behem ועל ידי הנחת הסודר עליהם יזכור שיש תפילין עליו ולא יבוא להפיח. In other words, it's a heker to remind you not to pass gas. Okay, ישן בהם שינת ארעי. Then I can do a שינת ארעי, וכיצד הוא עושה? מניח ראשו בין ברכיו והוא יושב וישן. Okay, so I can put my head in between my knees and I can sleep that way. היו תפילין כרוכים בידו, מותר לישן בהם אפילו שנת קבע. If the tefillin are tied to my hand, I'm not wearing them, they're just tied to my hand, I can sleep them even shenat keva. Why? Because I'm not wearing them, so there's no problem of shema yafiach, and there's also no problem that they'll fall off because they'll fall to the floor because I'm wrapping them tightly. He says, if I'm just holding them in my hands and they're not tied to my hands, then I can't sleep with them even shenat arai, because then they might fall off when I sleep and hit the floor. If they're in their bag, in any case it's permitted. Why? Because even if it falls on the floor, it's not that it falls on the floor, directly on the floor, it's within the bag. Here the Mishnah Berurah says, in other words, it needs to be something which has at least the space of a tefach, and then it's considered to be a separate reshut, and therefore even if it would fall on the karka, it wouldn't be a problem. Regarding the point of a sechadat, he says, really a sechadat is only skok v'kalut rosh, but he says, mikol makom mitzvah מן המאוחר שיהיה דעתו תמיד על התפילין ושלא יסיח דעתו מהן למשוך ולערער במחשבות רעות, שמטעם זה חייב למשמש כל שעה שלא יסיח דעתו מהן זולת בשעת התפילין, תפילין מאוד, אין צריך ליתן דעתו בתפילין. He says the only time you don't really need to think about the tefillin is during tefillah and limud. Why? Because the whole point of the tefillin is to remind you of a kadosh baruch hu and yirat shamayim. So if I'm osek betfila or osek belimud Torah, then that itself reminds me of yirat shamayim, so I don't need to think dafka of the tefillin. All right, that's regarding sleeping with tefillin. Any comments on that? Okay, so let's go on to see the last siman in the Chot Tefillin. This is a famous halacha. סעיף א', אסור לכנוס בבית הקברות או בתוך 4 אמות של מת ותפילין בראשו משום לועג לרש, ואם הם מכוסים מותר. The Gemara says, I cannot go in with a Sefer Torah, with tefillin, into a cemetery or within 4 amot of a met, because it's like considered lo'eg larash, you know, that here I'm able to put on mitzvot, make me commit mitzvot, and the met is no longer able to do any mitzvot, so therefore out of respect to the met, we take off the tefillin when we enter a cemetery or come within his 4 amot, unless they're covered up. Even mechusim mutar, so you can cover them up, and then it's permitted. There's a question here when it means says bebeit hakvarot. What does it mean? Does it mean the entire cemetery is prohibited, or just within 4 amot of a kever? Okay, if you look in the sources, the simple understanding seems to be that we're talking about 4 amot with a kever. So even if I enter a cemetery, but I'm not within 4 amot of the kever, I would be able to have tefillin on. Here, the Mishnah Berurah, he brings a whole machloket achronim on this, and he says as follows. He says, ואפילו תוך ד' אמות של מקום התחלת הפרים גם כן אסור ילקה מחיצה בפני כתביהם, ועד לא יראה ביחד ויאמר אסור תוך ד' אמות של קבר או של מת, דעת המגן אברהם דבא לרמוז ממקום בית הקברות לפנים אסור אפילו רחוק ד' אמות בקבר. יש מקילין בזה. In other words, the Magen Avraham says, once I've entered the cemetery, even if I'm more than 4 amot from the kever, I should take off the tefillin or cover them, but he says, יש מקילין בזה. ויין בבירור אחד, באמצע בית הקברות שיש קברים סביב, נראה דיש להחמיר אפילו רחוק ד' אמות מן הקבר. מה שאין כן בסוף בית הקברות, אין שם קברים, רק שהוקצה הקרקע לקברים, אין להחמיר מדינה ברחוק ד' אמות מקבר, ואף על פי כן נכון שלא יכנוס כלל בתפילין של ראשו כלשהו לפנים מחיצת בית הקברות, שמא יתקרב בתוך ד' אמות של איזה קבר בלי דת. So he says as follows, really better to completely, before you even enter the cemetery grounds, to cover or take off the tefillin. But mi'ikar adin, if I'm entering a section of the cemetery that nobody's buried there yet, it's just designated for burial, then I can go there. If I'm already in the center of the cemetery, but I'm just somehow a little bit off more than 4 amot from each kever, that's not correct, and you should either take off the tefillin or cover them there. Here he also brings a machloket betoch daled amot shel met. Let's say I'm in a room with a met. Do we say the entire room is like daled amot or only daled amot? He says even if it's a kever of a katan, you should take off the tefillin. When you cover it, he says you should cover also the vitzuot, also the straps, cover the tefillin. I did see an interesting tshuva of the Tzitz Eliezer that, sorry, not this 4 stages. What about the kever of Rabbi Nachman Midreslav in Uman? And I go there with talit and tefillin. I don't know if any of you have ever been there. I haven't been. I don't know what people there do. But he was asked about this in Tafshin Nun Aleph, 1991. נשאלתי מתלמיד חכם אחד מחשובי חסידי ברסלב בנוגע לתפילה ולביש הטלית ותפילין בית העלמין, היא שאלה ממנו מענה על דבר שלאחרונה נפתחו שערי ציון של רבינו הקדוש מברסלב זיה. והשרירות מצויות שם והרבה אנשים עולים להשתתח על ציונו הקדוש. Can they go to the kever wearing talit and tefillin to pray there? So first of all, he says there's no real proof that there were other kavarim there. So what to do? So the Tzitz Eliezer actually permits this. He gives several reasons. He first of all quotes a Nitziv. The Nitziv said that this whole Isser of the davening near the met is only in the past, but nowadays that they actually dig the grave more than 10 tfachim deep, the grave itself is considered a different reshut, and then there's no isser to pray there. Again, I'm not sure in all places they dig this deep. Okay, some places they do dig this deep, but I'm not sure everywhere they do a proper 10 tfachim. I don't know what's done in Germany, but I think maybe in Germany probably is. You know the depth that they dig the graves?
Depends if there's ground rod or not, but at least 1.80 meters, at least.
Ah, you do 1.80 meters, like the 6 feet under.
Yeah, that's the at least amount.
Yeah.
And if there's groundwater or not.
In Israel, I don't think they certainly don't do 1.80 meters. They probably do 80 centimeters, but sometimes they'll bury in 2 levels. You know, a husband and wife on top of each other. So I'm not sure you would always have 10 tefachim. But anyway, that's what the Tzitz Eliezer relied upon. He brings here another svara that maybe by kivrei tzadikim it's not considered lag larash. It's because it's their kavod that people come and pray there. Okay. Anyway, he says that. He says there. He says here there is what to rely on to allow the davening there at Tziyun. Let's just see the last seif. Seif bet has to do with going and filling into a beit hamerchatz, right? Into a bathhouse, like in those times they had bathhouses. So he says in seif bet, bebeit hamerchatz, beit hachitzon, שכל העומדים בו הם לבושים, יכולים להניח שם תפילין לכתחילה. בבית האמצעי שמקצת בני אדם עומדים שם לבושים וקצת ערומים, אינו יכול להניחם לתפיל לכתחילה, ואם היו בראשו אינו צריך לחצן, ובבית פנימי שכל העומדים שם ערומים, אפילו היו בראשן צריך לחצן. So the Gemara says that within the bathhouse there were 3 rooms that you would enter. So the most inner room where people actually wash, obviously everybody's empty there. So there I'm not allowed to have tefillin on, right? Because everybody's empty, so I have to take off my tefillin before I go inside. There's the middle room, which people are partially dressed. In other words, apparently, in the outer room, that's when they would put on the full dress. But even in the middle room, they still had a partial dress. Maybe they had some sort of robe or something, which they would then take off when they would enter the most inner room. So in the middle room, people there are partially dressed, partially undressed. So there, you cannot put on tefillin lechatchila, but if you're wearing tefillin, you don't have to take them off. In the outer room where everybody's dressed, in other words, they're just moving from their robe to becoming fully dressed, so in that place you are allowed to put on tefillin lechatchila. That room is not problematic at all. Okay, but really in a place that people are wandering around naked, then you can't have tefillin on. That's the main halacha which comes out from there. All right, any questions or comments on this? Okay, very good. Shkoyach to everyone. Hadran alach ilchot tefillin, v'hadrach halan, datan alach ilchot tefillin, v'datach halan. Yishar koach gadol. Thank you for the perseverance, and